All right, welcome back to Hipster Codes. This is Hipster GW. Before we actually get started with the video, I just want to say this is the last Python coding video I'm going to do on this channel because we're going to move over to an exclusive Hipster Codes channel where we have an entire YouTube channel just dedicated to coding. So if you want to check that out, please go over there and give it a sub as well. That's where I'm going to move all of my coding videos to. The link will be in the description down below. So I hope to see you over there. So today I'm just going to make a basic dice rolling game, and by game it really just means a dice rolling function. Maybe eventually we can then upgrade this to some sort of a game with a GUI using tkey-enter or a web app using Flask or something like that. Maybe we can do that in a future tutorial, but I've just been going over the random module over the last couple of weeks during these videos and just want to find a practical way to actually implement that. Also, it gives us an excuse to practice a couple of like basic Python concepts, scope, functions, returns, things like that. So first thing we want to do is we want to create a function that will roll. Let's just start with 2 dice and let's have them be 6-sided dice. And we want the function to be called. And then we want it to return a string that says what both of the dice were and what the total is. So that's going to be our end goal, right? So first thing we need to do is define a function. In Python, you define a function with def for define. Then you give it a function name. And so let's just call it roll dice. Then these parentheses are where you're going to include any arguments or parameters that you want to accept. Now, we're not going to have anything now. We might in a few minutes. But then inside it, the end goal is we're going to return a string, right? So we're going to return you rolled a something and a something for a total of something, right? So that's going to be the end goal. Now that we have our beginning and end in mind, now we know how we can actually fill out the middle. All right, so we want to be able to call this function and have it return this. Obviously, we can do this now if we wanted to. And you call functions just by taking their name, and then you invoke them. And of course, this is where you would pass in any arguments. But of course, this isn't going to do anything because we run our main.py file here in our terminal. We don't get anything printed to the console because this isn't a print statement. So this is beginner Python 101, print statements and returning statements are different. So this is actually, we're calling this function and we're getting the string in return. So we could save this to a variable and call it results. And then we could print results. And now printing to the console is actually going to print the output of this function. So now we're ready to basically get rolling. And also like you know, something like this simple, you might not even want to save it to a variable. So I'm just going to delete this line of code just to save us one line of code. So now we want to put inside the function all the functionality, right? Which of course we're going to have 2 random dice. And if you want a refresher on the random module, specifically random numbers, I will link that video in the description below. But what we want to do is we want to import from the random module. We will import the rand int function or method. And this is going to give us a random integer between 1 low and 1 high. So if we do rand int and we invoke it, you see A is the low integer, B is the high integer. And so what we want is between 1 and 6. This is going to give us a random integer between 1 and 6. We could save this to the variable die. Now, this is a common mistake, is you think if you were to include this, let's make this an F string. So we're going to format this string so it's actually going to include our values for us. If we put in, you know, we rolled a die and a die, right, that this is not going to call this function twice. The way that the code runs, it runs from top to bottom. We call this function. This function runs from top to bottom. It runs this function once. It runs the randint method once, I should say. And then it saves it to the variable die. This variable die, as long as we are within the scope of this roll dice function, is going to be the same values. So if we were to call this function now, you might anticipate that this is going to call the randint function twice, but it does not. And you can see we rolled a 3 and a 3 for a total of blank, right? It's going to be 3 and 3 or 6 and 6 or 5 and 5 every single time. So both of the numbers are going to be matching. So we have to roll die 1, and then we have to call the randint function again. So we can roll die 2. I'm going to set this equal to random integer, once again between 1 and 6. And so now if we print out die 1 and die 2, you will see they should be different numbers, or at least random, separate random numbers each time. They are the same. Oh, Python 3. If they're the same number, it's solely due to chance. You can see we rolled a 3 and a 4, 6 and a 1. So the last piece of the puzzle we want is this total number. So we could do arithmetic inside this format string. I'm just going to do it in a separate line of code. So we're going to call it total. And then what we want is a total variable, which is going to be our first die plus our second die. We can see we rolled a 4 and a 2 for a total of 6. So we're able to actually get our functioning roll dice function now working. So if you wanted to, you could leave it here, but there's a couple of ways that we could actually improve our function. So let's say that we didn't want to limit this function to only 6-sided dice. Let's say that we want to give them the option to have, say, 20-sided dice if you're using D&D dice or something like that. What we could do is we could include a parameter here, and we could call it number of sides or num sides or something like that. And this could be an integer that would determine the maximum sides. So we could do num sides, and this will be the maximum. So we'll roll a number between 1 and whatever the maximum number of sides is. But let's say because most common dice are 6-sided, we wanted that to be the default argument, and we wanted to allow you to run this function without passing in a parameter. Because you see right now, if we try to run it, we're going to get an error because we're not including this positional argument. We could give it a default value of 6. And so now num sides, this variable inside our function, is going to be 6 unless we override it. So you see when we call roll dice down here, we're not including a parameter. So we're getting the maximum amount, which is 6 and 6 for a total of 6. Weird. I think that's just coincidence. Yeah, there we go. That was just coincidence that we rolled 6 and 6. But you can see now the maximum number of sides is up. We're going to roll between 1 and 6, right? That's going to be the random number that's rolled. But we could override it. So if we wanted to roll 2 d20s, we could say num sides equals 20. And now we are overriding this default argument with this keyword argument whenever we call roll dice. And now you can see rolled an 18 and a 6, rolled an 11 and a 2, 18 and a 9. You can see we're getting values that are over 6, but they're still between 1 and the maximum number of sides that we have. So hopefully that was a good review if you're just learning Python and if you're trying to figure out some of the basics. This was one of the first things that I did whenever I was first learning Python. Within the first week, I tried to create a rolling dice function, and I made a handful of mistakes. So I was just helping previous hipster GW try and fix some of his mistakes. So if you found this valuable, please give it a thumbs up. Please subscribe. If you liked this video, let me know in the comments as well. If there are other topics that you would like to cover, let me know. And we'll do it over again in the other channel, specifically called Hipster Codes. So if you want to check that out, check the link in the description. It'd be great to have you over there and sub over there as well. So thanks again for tuning in. We'll see you in the next video.